Good evening. I'm Anne McLean from the library's music division. I'm so delighted to be welcoming you back to the Woodall Pavilion because we are truly celebrating this spring to be here after a 2-year pause. And tonight is very special because this program and this premiere would have taken place 2 years ago in spring 2020, and we've been hoping very hard to have it since then. And it's exciting for us to be with you and to be able to have an incredible run of new music performances this spring. We've had several premieres. We've presented Flutronics with their music, their own compositions, and music by Ted Hearn and Steve Reich, and world premiere by Anna Klein. And we also had Johnny Gendelsman, the violinist, doing 6 pieces by new pieces in a collaboration with Washington Performing Arts. So it's exciting, and let's just jump right in here. I wanted to say that we are very interested in hearing about the many extended techniques, new visions of the quartet. This, you hear about Mivos Quartet as being a daring and ferocious ensemble, and every time I read this PR quote, I smile to myself, because ferocious, maybe, okay, you think maybe voracious or something, but the daring, there really isn't another more daring quartet. And I wanted to introduce them. First, Olivia DiPrato, violinist, Maya Bernardo, violinist, Tyler Borden, the cellist, and Victor Tafoya, violist. And of course, my good friend, Jeffrey Mumford. So welcome and thank you all for being here. I wanted to just start by saying that we're introducing tonight, we're resuming a 98-year-old tradition of commissioning new works with the Mivos premiere of Jeffrey's Amid the Still and Floating Depths. And I wanted to say, too, that another historic tradition here is presenting great quartets, and also to share the library's Stradivari instruments. So you have really chosen a powerful program to show off these instruments: Hannah Kendall, Webern, Carter, Rebecca Saunders, and Jeffrey's new piece. So I wanted to ask you all to talk a little bit about how you put this program together, how you chose these particular pieces, and whether you considered at all the Strads in that realm of choices. And then also, how has playing them affected your performance or thinking about the music?
Well, I can start a little bit. It's a really wonderful chance to be able to play on instruments like these. It's kind of a dream come true just to even play them for a moment, let alone to perform a concert of our own curation. So that's just a really wonderful experience to see what they're like, especially as a violist. The Stradivarius instruments maybe they're not as well known as the sort of like the perfection of the violins and the cello. So I was just very curious to see what would happen, and it's been really a challenge, but a really fun challenge to get used to a new instrument on kind of short notice for each of us. So it's great. You'll get to hear how we sound very soon on them. But I would say whenever we're putting together a program, whenever we get the chance to fully curate a program or curate around a premiere, we try to put a lot of thought into making it musically cohesive, first of all, so that it would be like going to an exhibition, like a modern art exhibition, if you will. Something like putting together pieces that complement one another, that kind of have a through narrative musically. And in this case, I don't think we knew that we were going to be playing on the Stradivarius instruments, so I don't think that influenced us in the choice of pieces. But it's definitely wonderful to see. We did end up curating a aesthetically very diverse program, so it's just been interesting to see how the instruments respond to very different pieces. I think Maya, you have some ideas there.
Well, yeah, and we're also really lucky that we chose this program ahead of time without knowing that the strads are the instruments that we were going to be playing, but that none of them involved extended techniques that we couldn't actually play on the Stradivariuses. Because sometimes we're playing on the bodies of our instruments, so we're doing something that we're not supposed to be doing on these instruments. And so this program really highlights the sound and tone, and we do play with a lot of different timbres, and it's really fun to do that on these new instruments because just new things are coming out for us. Especially like in the Saunders, you'll hear a lot of different timbral changes, and really just in all the pieces.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're never playing on our, because we know we would have had to use our own if we were playing on the bodies or anything, and we hadn't chosen a program that was doing that. Just nice.
Just one quick note about the instruments. Something that I found particularly interesting was playing harmonics, so playing lightly on the string, and the way that the harmonics pop out on those instruments is really wonderful and incredible. And you'll hear kind of in all the pieces different ways of playing harmonics on these instruments, and I think they sound really, really strong, really wonderful, and have this rich colors on it. So that's been really fun to experiment with and play with.
The cello, you were remarking on how large and both in size and sound.
Yeah, the cello, I was told, is one of 3 Stradivarius cellos that are slightly larger than cellos typically are. And I didn't notice it at first until I went to reach something that I can normally reach on my instrument, and I couldn't do it. And so I was like, what's going on here? I was like, okay, well, it's a different cello. And then I found out after that, this information, that it is actually a bigger cello than most cellos are. So I had to renegotiate some things. It's just this much, but it's enough to really unsettle you for a second. Yeah.
One of the things that struck me about the program that you put together is that so many of the pieces have visual references or literary references, and the work that you open with, Hannah Kendall's Glances, I Don't Belong Here, speaks to her use of visual inspirations. The 7 miniatures in the piece are inspired by places in Britain that she calls her most cherished non-urban settings. And they are inspired by photographs by a woman named Ingrid Pollard called Pastoral Interludes. These are hand-tinted silver prints of Black British citizens taken in the Lake District that challenge ideas of identity and ownership. It's a very powerful concept that inspired her, and she's talked about the experiences of being a Black person exploring rural England. So with this kind of commentary in mind, I was wondering, are you aware of these kinds of things from the beginning when you're first choosing works, or you just experience them purely musically?
I think first and foremost we were interested in playing music by Hannah, and so we found the piece through a more broad interest in her work. And then I think, I'm trying to recall, we started playing this piece a while ago, but yeah, factoring in the context, the conceptual framework from which the piece was generated, that came in through the working process. And it's really clearly structured in how she lays it out. There are these short, kind of contained pieces. It's actually one of a few pieces on the program that is made up of shorter, more tightly contained pieces. So, yeah, I don't know, does anyone else have anything to add?
No, but just as you mentioned, it's funny that we have 3 pieces that have these kind of short movements, so they kind of tie in very well together. The Webern has the 6 bagatelles, and then the Carter has 2 fragments. So yeah, it's nice to explore these little. It's like looking into something just for a short time and then going away for it. So.
It's beautifully paced, your program, with the shorter pieces, the Carter fragments, and then the Webern, and then these longer, much more in sort of time-intensive works. But I love the combination, and I wondered, too, if you were aware of Jeffrey's long involvement with the music of Elia Carter when you chose those pieces.
Yes, we were definitely aware of that, and I thought it would be a nice pairing for sure.
They're beautiful pieces, and harmonics, he talks about that. Would you like to talk a little bit about those pieces and how they will perhaps be of interest to people in relation to yours?
Well, sure. Of course, the fragment, the first fragment was written, it's all in harmonics, completely. The whole piece is written in harmonics. It's a particularly distinctive sound, a very glassy, ethereal sound that you'll hear. The second fragment was written to celebrate the long-standing relationship he had with the Arditi String Quartet. He was championing his music for years and years and years. So I think they make a nice pairing. In the second fragment, you hear these relationships, interrelationships of small ideas put together, linked together, and the great use of silence. Mm-hmm. The first fragment, you have this world that's created by the use of harmonics.
He used the word poignant when he wrote about this. There's a statement on the Boozy and Hawkes publisher site, I believe, which is interesting. As poignant as that feeling, I'm interested in that. And also, you and I have talked about his multi-level and multi-person conversations.
Yes,
and this
yes.
is like that too,
Yeah.
for me.
In a small context. I mean, there's longer pieces,
very small.
You're able to hear the unfolding of dialogues and scenarios and dramatic interplay.
Your own compositions, back to the visual elements, yours are very visual in their inspiration. And I wanted to ask you about your vision of the new work that we'll hear. This is the Washington premiere of this work, which is great for us. It's a co-commission of the Los Angeles Philharmonic Association and the library's Carolyn Royal Just Fund. And I believe the LA Phil premiere was 2019.
Yes, 2019.
Yeah. You've said that your title suggests the image of a still place resonant with varying intensities of light, which interact with one another on many levels. And I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about this quote, and I'm curious about how your concept relates to the structure. Did those interactions sort of help create the structure?
Well, yes. The beginning of the piece deals with the juxtaposition of pizzicato, plucking the string, and arco. And there's a great deal of interaction between those two kinds of articulations throughout the whole piece. Together with the sense of the opening material recurring in different parts of the piece, but in different contexts. So you have the same material or similar material, but the ear will have referenced it differently when it's played later on after having other music intervene, shall we say, if that makes sense. So the idea of this interaction is very important to me. I'd like to have many things going on at once, at different rates of speed, to kind of, my music is very influenced by cloud imagery, and so to reference the idea of structures that are suspended in space, that pass by each other in open spaces between foreground and background, the clouds passing over sky, and you see, today we have this huge dramatic display, this enormously vibrant cloud forms drenching us, and opening up the sky, and then drenching us again, and opening up the sky. As a child, I used to look out my window and get thunderstorms in the summertime in DC, which is very dramatic, and I love seeing how they used to unfold, and the sky would turn green and purple, and I was fascinated by that.
I was wondering if you, as a group, talked with Jeffrey about the visual elements or the concept of the piece, or how did you approach it as a group, the five of you?
I don't recall discussing the visual element, but I will say that everything he's saying tracks with the affect of the piece. I mean, this incredible expansiveness, suspension in air. The whole piece, you just feel like you're being carried along by a current, and you can't fight it. You just gotta hop in and let it carry you. So I think the imagery does tie in with, I'd say, how conceptually we've been thinking about it.
Well, and I loved what you're saying about this theme that keeps coming back, that opens up kind of like these storms, right? That each time they open up in a different way, there's always a different formation, and the way that we approach it kind of changes the way that one listens to it. But there are these recurring things that, that's from the very beginning, and like it's just really beautiful to be able, for us too, to be able to like feel that cycle, and you start to feel things in like a different pace, not quite as, linearly, but just kind of like these big waves and circles.
I was interested in talking with Johnny Gendelsman when he was here about how he approached the many composers. He's commissioned something like 24 composers in this project. He has This Is America, the name of the project. And I was saying to him, how did you go about this? And he said, in many cases, they didn't discuss anything. They just said, I'm interested in working with you, and we'll take it from there. And only a few people, he said, told him from the beginning, well, I'd love to work with multimedia, or, I have a particular formation in mind. I didn't realize that it could be so free form, but it's wonderful. It shows a tremendous trust, artistic trust that you have.
It came to fruition when I met them at the June in Buffalo Festival back in 2017. And I was so impressed with how they negotiated this enormous variety of music, particularly the Fairy Blues Second Quartet, which is this incredibly thick, dense, very expressive, but doesn't take any prisoners. This piece takes no prisoners, and I was just amazed by their playing. And so, over the course of that festival, we got to know each other at the Marriott Hotel after we. It was nice for a few drinks, and we just got to know each other. And I proposed a project with them, and thankfully took it on and evolved and developed from there.
I was interested in your comment yesterday that you said you would love to hear a warm tone reminiscent of Debussy or Ravel from the strings, and I wouldn't have thought of that. Is this something that in general, for this piece, would you talk a little about those colors and ideas?
Well, I love those composers, and I love. I used to practically live here at the library as a child growing up in DC, and the National Gallery, the two most favorite places on this planet. In the National Gallery, they have this amazing collection of impressionist paintings and 17th century Dutch landscapes, and I love the clouds in those paintings. I love the colors, and so the idea of the warmth of the roundness of tone, the roundness of expression, like you're enveloped in this feeling of home.
I was thinking too about comments. I read comments that Mark Swed made when he heard your premiere of the work, and I just was so interested. He said, sheets of individual string tones no doubt had structural reasons, but for a first-time listener, they evoked all kinds of noises, be they wind whipping through the sails of ships at sea or animals in the forest reacting to an upset. This is music of adventure around the corner. And I love this because what you've just said in terms of the structure and so on, I wasn't expecting this imagery, but it certainly fits your style as a quartet, the adventure and so on. But in terms of the timbres and so on, what did you think when you saw that, heard this quote? Were you surprised?
No, I know Mark.
And
I
you
know
just...
his take on things, and I really respect his ears and his openness to different kinds of music. And so
back to the visual realm for one moment. Are you a visual artist yourself? Do you consider, I know your wife, Donna Coleman, is a fine painter.
yes, she is.
Are you also?
I started out as a painter in undergraduate school, and music took over my sophomore year. Don't have enough time to do both, but I still think of my work as very visual.
Do you ever draw paint?
I do draw,
Interesting.
but not as much as I would like.
Thinking about the Webern and the Saunders, how they go together, I'd love to hear your perspective on the Saunders, which is such a deeply affecting piece. It's totally different from the other pieces on the program for me. And I was interested in the long poem that I believe in, that inspired, or that she wrote and inspires the work. But first, just describe, if you would, the nature of the piece and the structure. That's a big one.
Do you? Oh, if you don't go for it. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think she's a composer that we've been interested in for a while. She's quite prominent, of course, and heard a number of her works, and yeah, we have been trying to find the right program to put this piece on and to start getting to know her work, performing it. So this will be our first time performing this particular quartet, and it's, yeah, it kind of begins with a melody that's almost like a unison chanting on the note D. It's vaguely reminiscent of a Bach-like chorale melody, but it becomes very quickly kind of distorted and refracted, and then after that sort of develops a little bit, mainly in the violins, it gets a little bit refracted through the rest of the instruments. The rhythm kind of starts to kick in, and the kind of pitch material just kind of gets destroyed in a good way, and is how I picture it. It kind of gets filtered and distorted and transposed, and then chopped up, and then put through a soppanticello harmonic sort of machine through all of us, and then you come out to another section. I don't want to describe the whole piece because it would be more exciting to hear it than have me talk about it. But in some ways, it's sort of taking a simple kind of unison motif idea and putting it through just so many different ways of analyzing it, even just as a pure sort of sound level. So there are a lot of pitches, but it's almost more of a timbral experience for a lot of the piece. And so in that way, it's kind of interesting to compare it to compare it sonically to Jeffrey's new piece, because I feel like in Jeffrey's language, there's a lot of that transformation, but it's mainly through pitch material and harmonies and things moving and sliding and what's the word, modulating within kind of a tonal language that's really unique, like that stands out. It's very characteristic, I would say, of Jeffrey's music. And then there's, it's an interesting, very different take on how to transform material. Yeah.
This is a library commission too, I should say. It was Wigmore Hall was the lead commissioner, but we joined that commission as well, and so it's exciting to have both, as you say, on one program. But talk a little further and about there are two parts, I believe, as well of the piece.
Yeah, just jumping in on Rebecca Saunders' piece. Just also, as you were saying, I feel like the beginning is very emotional and very romantic, actually. So that I feel like the beginning almost relates to the Weber in that kind of really romantic, beautiful, and then it gets into this crazy middle section that's very rhythmic, and then at the very end it's like extremely sad. I find it very extremely sad. We have all these distorted sounds and quarter tones, and it's like kind of, it has this really beautiful, like sad atmosphere to it. So I don't know. It's a very emotional piece, I think.
Yeah, I'd say the end. For me, it's sad, but it's also, the word that comes to mind for me is alienating, almost. And the whole piece is kind of this timbral exploration with the backdrop very explicitly being Bach and Brahms. I think especially romantic music, although there is a Bach reference, but I hear a lot of romantic music in the background of her sound world. And the end is, after all this kind of timbral exploration with this, but again with this in the background, the endings, it's so striking and feels very kind of alienated from itself. To me, I don't know, that's a personal feeling. But that's the way, because it's just the way she is exploring and asking you to deal with the materials really puts you in, at least me, the cello has some kind of striking moments and in some kind of uncomfortable positions where you're just like, you're really not sure what to do. I mean, in a sense, you're not sure what to make of it. It's, I guess, maybe a better way to put it, even when you're doing it. I mean, you try your best and I make something of it, but yeah. But there's no clear goal in the way she notates the last one with what she really wants it to sound like. Not, at least I haven't maybe lived with it enough to find it yet, but that's maybe where I get this idea of alienation.
I learned that the piece is, instead of unbreathed, I've always thought unbreathed was how to pronounce it, but apparently it's supposed to be unbreathed. And the piece refers to breath, and in the poem, she talks about souffle, the French word souffle, and ghosts, vapor, all these kinds of evanescent wisps of things, concepts and sound-wise and so on. She also talks about interesting tactile aspect. So when composing, I imagine holding the sounds and noises in my hands, feeling their potential between my palms, weighing them, and textures and musical gestures develop out of this. Then, like pictures placed in a large white room, I set them in silence, next to, above, and beneath and against each other. Very interesting commentary, and you'll see in the program, if you look at the program, the poem is in there. But so this leads me to something we were touching on the other day, and Jeffrey, as a person who writes for quartet and writes for string ensembles and so on, and you guys who do the forward momentum part, I keep thinking, gosh, the string quartet tradition is so very old now and distinguished, and is it going to eventually become fragile, and will it, begin to die away or something? But it seems like with groups like yours, it's more and more vibrant every day. How do you explain this phenomenon? Do composers drive it? Do players drive it? Does everybody drive it? But I'm teasing, but what is your reaction to this world? How does it happen?
I think one part of it, at least for us, I think, is just to explore, keep exploring different type of music that we're interested in. Do a lot of collaborations with a variety of artists and composers that come from different backgrounds, and just really closely collaborate with artists, and just keep being interested in different types of music as well, not just play one kind of music. I think at least that's part of it. If you want to add.
That's what's so nice about having us as also 4 people as a group and then 4 people as individuals, is that we all do value exploration, but we all have explored in different ways as well, both our own personal practice on our instruments and then as a group. So we're all bringing that together, and it's really special to kind of just see what everyone's bringing to the table. I mean, it expands our repertoire as well, is to see what we're all interested in and the people that we want to work with. And so it expands our repertoire and personally, our own growth, right?
And for you as a composer, what do you think about this in terms of orchestra writing too, for strings and so on? Do you feel like everybody has said what there is to say with extended techniques on stringed instruments, and no?
Not at all. I mean, I think there's an endless possibilities in exploring what can be done. I mean, there was a quote by Scherberg: "There's still good music to be written in C major." I think we've only touched the surface of what's possible, and I don't think the Norman Lebrecht, prognostication that classical music is dead and all that. It's, I think, hogwash. I mean, I think it cannot die, because each day someone's creating something new, and I think it's to all of our salvation that it continues that way. And I think the world is full of sounds that we haven't heard yet.
We've talked too about the nature of the role of the artist, and now what that is about. It's a huge kind of a responsibility if you think about it like that. But I was wondering, when you're writing now, as opposed to when you wrote the first library commission, you had the focus of blue light. What is your, I was wondering how your perspective may have evolved on that. That's a heavy question, I know.
That is. I mean, I was much younger composer then. My harmonic language has changed. I think more vertically now, I guess, than I did before. Harmonically, that was a very emotional piece for me to write at that time. The soloist, Curating, and the pianist Bruce Sanderson were very dear friends of mine, and Bruce at the time was battling AIDS, and the concert almost never didn't happen, and we were trying to figure out how do we do this, how are we going to bring this off, and so it necessarily affected the piece's evolution. It became something like a statement of validation in a way, and Bruce came through like a champ, and unfortunately then he passed away, but he was a dear friend for many, many years, and so that was a very, very special occasion. This as well is a special occasion. I think in approaching this piece, I wanted to create something, well certainly it's written for 4 instruments as opposed to just 2. I wanted to create a piece that was more explorative of color and articulation, different kinds of articulation, and creating a world, a separate world to itself. If that makes sense, hopefully.
Yeah, I haven't heard, I've just heard bits and pieces of the rehearsal. I'm very interested in hearing it. Well, explore is such a word that conjures so many things that you're all doing. And I was thinking back to your, the designation of you as daring and ferocious. The thing is, you really are exploring all the time. I mean, as a quartet, you're doing an incredible range of things, like just this week, their new recording with Mary Halverson is coming out on Nonesuch. There was an article in the New York Times about how this is a classical album, which caught my eye. And I was reading the classical albums, and then I was thinking, wait a minute, I know Mary Halverson. She's a good. So, but talk a little bit about these other kinds of explorations. You're doing so many of them that are wild and fun.
It is fun, yeah. The album that we did with Mary was just released. I think it was the 14th of May, the Friday of that week. So it's very new, and that music was premiered in September. So it's, yeah. I mean, the collaborations that we have been able to make happen through working and meeting people and exploring have just been really, really wonderful. And I would say there's a lot of really interesting, unique music being written now. I mean, it has been for a long time, but right now particularly seems to be pretty rich in this zone of what people might think of first as either classical or jazz or free improvisation or just improvisation of creative musicians making music in this area, performing themselves, writing for ensembles, collaborating directly. And it's just, yeah, we've been having a wonderful collaboration with also Ambrose Akinmuzire, and we've been working with Saul Williams for a number of years on various projects of his that kind of go all over the place. And I think that's part of the, we're fortunate to be alive working now in this particular time in music, and classical music in particular, where people are looking for ways to sort of keep classical music from dying, and it's pretty easy if you just keep your mind open and look for interesting artists, and it's like there they are, you know, you just have to look for them and listen. So that's a wonderful, hopeful thing that we get to experience quite a bit.
I'm hopeful too, and these kinds of projects make me heartened, because I do worry. You know, a lot of presenters worry about this whole trajectory. That, but I was interested in this. The pieces you're talking about. Belladonna and Amaryllis both have visual elements too, right? They have paintings, or they're inspired with paintings, and I think, videos and so on. And that's something that is exciting to see in so many contexts, ways to have a multimedia experience. And I think that is carrying a wave of new things. It's fun, not just interesting intellectually, but also fun. But I was thinking about a piece that I read about for the first time. I didn't know it existed, a Charles Mingus piece called The Clown. Have you ever heard of that piece? It's a piece for, I guess, two violas, two cellos, and one viola, two violins, and two cellos. And we have the manuscript of it, and I knew we had some pieces in our collection that were written for strings, but I didn't really know what it was. But this was a piece that he felt didn't have a genre, didn't have a borderline, didn't have that piece is, very old. But I can't wait to find that manuscript and get it out, look at it, and try to see if people that we know would like to play it here. I would think.
We'll play it. Right? I mean,
Well, it's exciting. Well, what questions do you guys have before the quartet has to warm up and stuff? Does anyone have a question for them? No? Maybe. Any thoughts that you have about coming up projects for all of you that you'd like to mention before we move on?
One thing we're looking forward to, it doesn't have a set date, is a new commission from composer Sarah Hennies. It's concert-length work. That's something, this kind of closes a lot of, this concert specifically and it's a culmination of a lot of work we've been doing. So we have this summer is a little calmer, and then we're looking further ahead. So we have the Sarah Hennies Commission, and we have been recording the works of Steve Reich, and those are going to see an exciting future, which maybe we can't speak about totally right now, but keep an eye out to hear about that.
And also we're hoping to record Jeffrey's piece pretty soon. So we're excited about recording that as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. And you, any particular projects coming up for you?
Well, I'm just finishing a string quartet for another quartet, fantastic quartet, the Jack Quartet. And now the next project is a piece for viola and harp for a young, fantastic violist named Jordan Back, who's just incredibly inspiring. He's a violist of color, and the harpist is a harpist of color, and so I'm looking forward to that. And then my dream project, what I call my bucket list piece, is a double concerto for violin, cello, and orchestra that we're trying to get conductors and orchestras lined up for that. It's about 2 or 3 years down the line, and a CD of concertos.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I think this is a great thing to look forward to hear these new projects. Thank you so much for being willing to talk about tonight's project, which is, as I say, very special for us. So thanks, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.